It was cold, Denver, Colorado, mid-November. My wife and kids and I drove down to Colorado Springs for the afternoon. And when we came back to our home in the evening, we noticed that a side window had been completely crushed into the house. And so we were surprised at that. I kept my wife and my kids in the car while I went into the front door and looked in the house really quickly and saw that our furniture had fallen over. And the furniture that had fallen over was butted up against that window. It was a bookshelf. I called the base police and report what we had found. I went through the rest of the house and I discovered that the house is safe and fine. Given the suspicious activity that I had experienced that week, my mind naturally went to the fact that I think this was a break-in. Things like that don't happen on military bases.
Recruits, recruiting goals, recruiters.
Every branch of the military is struggling to meet its recruiting goals.
The report from Senator Marco Rubio and Congressman Chip Roy accuses the Pentagon of weakening our armed forces by pushing leftist ideology on race and gender.
What is critical race theory? I suspect it's not as major an issue as we've made it out to be in the media.
And the United States Military Academy is a university. And I want to understand white rage. And I'm white.
Extremism in the ranks.
We are focused on extremist behaviors.
Share your pronouns in your email. Initiate difficult conversations about racial and gender barriers.
Our Army and my squad come from a diverse background. Inclusion and equality are what's important to us. That's how we'll win our nation's wars.
We have been telling you about a Space Force commander.
Fired as a Space Force commander
after he made explosive revelations
claiming that Marxist ideologies are invading the U.S. military.
A mission of equity. Are you going to join the mission of equity? Can you define it? Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lohmeier can define it. He knows what that mission looks like. He was a commander in the Space Force. He was then fired for speaking out against the open political indoctrination that he saw there.
Sortie in the F-15 was on April 1st of 2013. It's been over 10 years, and every time someone asks me if I miss flying, I get around an airfield and see F-15s flying overhead or hear jet engines. Yeah, I miss it a great deal. You get that feeling in your chest like, I know exactly what they're seeing, I know exactly what they're feeling. I know the rush that they get every single time that they go up. And there's nothing not to miss about being up in a jet. I met Stroke before he was Stroke. He was just Jonathan, an unnamed student pilot in the fighter training pipeline, and gave him his dollar flight. It's great to see that after over a decade of gaining experience in the fighter, he's here now presenting a red air threat, a Chinese or a Russian red air threat for our student training pipeline in the F-15 community.
So it's really clear from Air Force leaders, and not just Air Force, the entire military is preparing for a fight against China.
China poses the most consequential threat to the nation's national security.
Growing tensions between the U.S. and China now extending to hundreds of miles above the Earth.
They are the top threat to this country. President Xi is the most ideological leader that China's had since Chairman Mao.
We go from day to day and talking to the American fighter squadrons that we're supporting. They will tell us what type of threat they want to fight, whether that's China
and you
or Russia. That's exactly right.
Historically, we've been the best in the world because we've trained seriously and we've invested our best talent and an appropriate budget to allow the most experienced, talented Americans to sit in those cockpits and to develop a skill set that is uncommon. We've always historically cared about merit. Didn't necessarily get called merit throughout my career. You don't talk about merit in the workplace, but you do talk about being lethal. You talk about being excellent. You talk about being the best. That mattered, and it's what made the American military the most lethal military on the planet.
I was shaped, molded, inspired, prodded, kicked, energized by instructors like you. Being a fighter pilot is more than just, right hand, left hand, flying a jet. It's an attitude, it's a mindset. You taught me more than just flying an airplane. You taught me that controlled aggression and that discipline that is required to be an excellent fighter pilot.
After I left the flying community, however, I came into what was then Air Force Space Command and later became the Space Force. And because the type of operations that we were involved in, as important as they were to the American people, there wasn't a sense of danger in the workplace like there is on the fighter flight line. And because that sense of danger was lost, it seemed almost inevitable that we were able to be more distracted by political discourse, by what was on the television in the military workplace.
Thank you, George Floyd, for sacrificing your life for justice.
Because my black life matters and so does my voice. So what you're going to do right now...
Peaceful demonstrations against police violence and systemic racism.
Whether it's the pandemic or whether it's the virus of racism.
That's when in my career I began to notice that we were starting to be divided by political discourse. And it only got worse with time, especially after the Biden administration came in.
I'll be reaffirming the federal government's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility, building on the work we started in the Obama-Biden administration.
I'm hereby directing the Department of Defense and Pentagon to establish a Space Force as the 6th branch of the armed forces. That's a big statement.
Space Force becomes a legal entity and is written into Title 10, December of 2019.
Buckley Air Force Base is set to be the home of a new Space Force unit. Space Delta 4, or Del 4, is tasked with executing land and space-based missile warning missions.
At that time, there was one person in the Space Force, and it was General J. Raymond.
My sincere thanks to President Trump for the privilege of serving as the first Chief of Space Operations.
Once the Space Force became a reality, you needed a four-star general to join the Joint Chiefs, and that was him. And so he sat now at the table, but was the only member of the new branch of the military. It was a really unique time. And I was one of those who, in the fall of 2020, joined the Space Force. And at that point, I had recently moved to Buckley Air Force Base. I had been sworn in as the commander of the 11th Space Warning Squadron. We were in charge of the nation's missile warning. It was one of many different missions that were done at a base. And over all of those units that existed at Buckley was a single person, the base commander. The base commander was outside of my chain of command, but he had the purview for the entire base. He was simply responsible for civil engineering and maintenance and facilities management and the PR for the base. And so it was that person who I saw that started to politicize the military workplace.
Can you kind of tell us a little bit more about your journey rising through the ranks as a person of color in the Space Force?
And so whatever your command was, or whatever unit you happened to be serving in, you were subjugated to this guy's emails as the base commander. He'd blast it out to all of the members of the base. He would have weekly town halls and talk about race identity politics, critical race theory, white fragility, white supremacy. You're to watch certain YouTube videos, certain Amazon Prime documentaries, Netflix documentaries to learn about your white guilt, your white supremacy. And then we'll come back to the table next week to discuss the ways in which we think we can do better.
Biggest terror threat in this country is white men.
Overt, violent white supremacy.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be.
All of the stuff that is already tearing American people and citizens apart polarizing the nation.
And please, show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
It's become kind of a symbol.
He was injecting that into the base culture. And what was so hard for your typical service member in trying to push back against someone like that is that we had recently begun to create a climate of fear so that if you're a white male, you don't dare try and hold a black female accountable in your unit for something she's done wrong because you might be a racist. If your black base commander is telling you that the founders are evil and you're a white male, you don't stand up and say, "Sir, I respectfully disagree with you," because you're afraid you'll be labeled a racist. The circumstances, politically, socially, culturally, had changed in the country, and now the political animal inside of him came to life. And he had the stage, the bully pulpit now, available to him to talk about what he really truly cared about, and it was fighting racism. But what he meant by that was that if you're white, you're a part of the problem, and he let the base know that. Like so many other families that lived on the base, my wife and I knew this problem was going to come to a head. Someone needed to speak up. It had been 3 years since being fired from my command at Buckley. I often wondered if by speaking out, I'd done any good. Had my actions had any impact? My family was safer now, but I was still haunted by the Marxist threat tearing our military apart. We've come to a spot that's near where I did survival training. I'm reflecting on the purpose of SEER training. They try and train you to at least believe that it's possible to survive. It's possible to evade capture. It's possible to resist and escape. In the Geneva Convention, decades ago, they made it illegal in international treaty to use coercive techniques to extract information from captives, from POWs. Because communist captors would extract confessions of guilt from POWs for things that they'd never done. I look at now modern society from 2020 and 2021 and onward, and I see that Black Lives Matter organizers, Antifa, and political activists are extracting confessions of guilt from the average American citizen. You see videos of white people being asked to kneel and apologize for their white privilege. They're being asked in military trainings to recognize their privilege. They're being asked to recognize their implicit and unconscious biases. Whether or not you know you're guilty of things, we know you're guilty of things, and so we're demanding an apology. And that's the very kind of thing that the Geneva Convention seemed to outlaw in international treaty. One of the challenges of separating from active duty service was figuring out what you want to do when you're done. All we really knew as a family was we wanted to get away from it all and get to a place like Idaho. And what lies ahead, you don't know. And you're not sure what your obligations are either in your community or to the country. But you still take the oath seriously, which was to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. It was either choose to stay in, even though they've wrecked your reputation, and hope that you can do some good for your country in uniform, or you can choose to get outside of uniform and have what you hope will be a full reign on the free expression of your views and ideas and values, and use your voice for the betterment of the country. Hello.
Hi, I'm calling from Congressman Glenn Grothman's office. Is this Matt Lohmeier?
Yeah, this is him.
Great. We're scheduling a hearing with the House Oversight Committee. The chairman would really like you to come to D.C.
Well, I can't say much at the moment, but Congressman Grothman's office called and wanted to talk about a congressional hearing. So I guess I've got some things to think about. Well, when I was General Raymond's aide-de-camp and there were active, ongoing conversations about the stand-up of a new branch of the military for space, we traveled nearly 30 times to Washington, D.C., both to the Pentagon, to the White House, and to other offices in Washington. Now, I reflect on the possibility of heading back to DC in a civilian capacity and what that would mean for my family. So I guess I've got some things to think about, and I need to talk to Sarah.
So we drive away from Buckley in kind of a hurried shamble of a mess. I remember throwing like a bottle of bleach in the car and like taking a picture because you couldn't see the floor of the car. It was just a kind of a very chaotic mess. We didn't know we were moving here until 4 days before we moved here. So it was a pretty emotional roller coaster of a time. But we pull into town and there's a bunch of people on the side of the road doing some kind of a parade, freedom something, with flags and red, white, and blue shirts on. And my children said, why are those people doing that? And I got a little emotional. I said, because they love freedom. And having just come from a place where, as an American who experiences freedom all the time, you don't realize until something's taken away. But I did feel like some things were taken away at Buckley. And so it was a foreign feeling to me. And so coming here felt like a breath of fresh air.
Those days that were passing, I remember feeling almost like I could tangibly tell that there were hairs losing pigment in my head, my jaw, it was a very stressful time. Manageable, and frankly, a part of the reason it was manageable is because you have in your life a support group that is your family. It's your wife. My wife's trustworthy, and so to have her support means a great deal. If she said, I think you're off your rocker, then that would have meant something to me too. It would have probably meant I was on the wrong path.
Being more introverted makes it harder when the world's trying to get your attention, and especially that Saturday that the news broke of his story, and the whole world seemed to be trying to get a hold of him.
Big developing story tonight surrounding Air Force Commander Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lohmeier.
The man I'm interviewing today has 1,200 hours of flying the T-38 as an instructor pilot, followed by the F-15C. This is not just anybody we're talking about that served the military.
Colonel, I know that there are people who are very unhappy that you have written this book and that you've taken a public stand, and they have relieved you of your command at the Space Force. But I also want to believe that while there are some folks upset at you, I want to believe that there are a lot of people who are deeply grateful. And maybe they're not saying it publicly yet. I hope they will. But they're saying, Matt, thank you.
Patches that have pilot wings on them mean a great deal to you because you had to go through your pilot training to get the patch. This is my Fighting Cock's name tag that I wore in Okinawa, Japan. You have your normal name on there, Matt Lohmeier, with some kanji beneath it. And on Fridays, you wear a patch with your call sign on it, Cutter. Let's say you're on a deployment and there's a bunch of people from various communities around, and you're walking around with an Eagle driver patch on your shoulder. Everyone knows that you're in an F-15 squadron, you fly the greatest fighter in the world. That's why that patch matters versus a young Matt Lohmeier patch that everyone is given when they show up to learn how to fly the T-6 in pilot training, whether or not they've performed. Basically every unit you show up in, there's certain patches that you wear that identify what your new fellowship or brotherhood is, and everyone takes pride that they're a part of that clique. And that's good unifying identity politics. It's like you belong to a fraternity that worked really hard to get here, and you have something to be proud of. You've accomplished something, so wear the patch. You've accomplished something, so wear the wings. And one of the things that DEI does to absolutely destroy is meritocracy. It's like, hey, we're interested in equity, which really means forced equality of outcomes. And when you force equality of outcomes, you strip merit out of the picture, and people don't know whether they earned the badge, so to speak. Everyone gets an award. There's no disambiguation of the Fighting Cocks. They're all a brotherhood, whether they're male or female, black or white. What you knew is you wore the same uniform, flew the same jet, did the same mission, and that lethality mattered, and that was all that mattered. Lethality mattered, period. And if you wanted to compromise on that, you might as well, hang up your helmet bag in your helmet and throw your wings in the trash can, because you're no longer useful to the community. The decision to testify before Congress weighed heavily on me. I knew it would put my family in the bullseye of the military establishment. And so it mattered to me to have Sarah's buy-in.
The world needs voices like Matt's because he's willing to be bold and courageous, and he is willing to speak the truth despite the consequences. He's not doing this as a popularity contest, and so that gives him the freedom to speak the truth rather than be concerned about speaking what people want to hear. And I think in a world of declining morality and increasing confusion, we need voices like that to speak up.
One of the things that I had seen early on, I'd probably been in command for a week, and one of the chaplains on the base stopped by to visit and introduce himself. The thing that he seemed to care about the most was having race conversations with my troops. It was, hey, nice to meet you. Where are you from? Where are you coming from? So let me tell you about my Race in America lecture series that I'd like to give to the troops. And so I had to say, respectfully as I could, time out. This is an ops unit. We have an operational mission to accomplish. I welcome the chaplain and any chaplain to have conversations with my troops, but I'd really like to talk with you more before I say yay or nay. And he was, quite frankly, surprised that I didn't just say, oh yeah, sure, let's set up the Race in America lecture series for my troops. And he looked uncomfortable, he looked offended, and he says, I've heard about commanders like you, but I've never met one. And instantly, I was aware that he had been trained to think that if anyone's going to be opposing your lecture series, then this is how we identify someone who's a racist. I've heard about commanders like you means someone told him about there will be commanders like this guy who aren't going to take warmly to this, and you need to let me know who they are. And in fact, he did let the base commander know who I was. We scheduled a follow-up visit, and I kindly invited the chaplain. I asked him to tell me about his Race in America lecture series. And first, I'd like you to define for me what you mean by racism. I'd like to understand where you're coming from before I approve anything for my troops. This isn't going to be a mandated training, but if you want to set this up and I'm going to allow my folks to go to it, I'd like to understand where you're coming from personally. And he says, well, basically all whites are racist. I said, I don't agree with that, and that view is not welcome in my unit. So we've got people of every race. You've got people of various family backgrounds, economic backgrounds. They're all here in this unit, and the chaplain needs to make him or herself completely 100% available to every one of my troops without creating any unnecessary, uncomfortable friction because you're wanting to preach politics or a personal belief system that you've got and foist that upon them. I said, so not only is that view not welcome, it's racist. I said, to impugn guilt to a group of people based on the color of their skin, regardless of anything they've ever done, is the definition of racism. And he says that's not possible and blacks can't be racist. He was very disappointed when he left the office because I told him I would not agree to having those lectures for my troops. He then started inviting only the black members of my unit to join him at the chapel to have conversations, to talk about how they could fight white supremacy. And he's doing it with the help of the base commander. At our base, the base commander was the driving force. He was the ideologue who was pushing a particular political agenda. He had plenty of material to grab from online, but it simply wasn't a part of the military workplace until this kind of thing started happening. There are some now common household names for people that have been paying attention, like Ibram Kendi, who wrote How to Be an Anti-Racist, and Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility, and Ijeoma Oluo's So You Want to Talk About Race. These kinds of books started to be handed out as reading assignments with the expectation of discussion. And if you spend any time in these books, they're hate-filled and they're racist in and of themselves. And there's this adamance that it's okay to demonize an entire group of people based on not what they've done, but because of who they are accidentally, almost as it were, by nature, their skin color. We continued to have weekly town halls to discuss race. There was just an extra edge of politics tied to everything this guy was doing. Well, I gave feedback to my supervisor, who was a colonel, who said, I used to be the guy's vice base commander. He doesn't take warmly to feedback. I'd recommend not bringing this up with him. I thought, okay, well, then I'll file a formal written IG complaint.
The golden age is a choice.
A choice to cherish the greatest gift we've been given.
Waking up every day an American citizen. It flows from our founding fathers.
Through our grandparents.
Through our parents.
Through us.
To future generations.
Our heritage is our future.
The golden age is a choice.
Let's choose well.
In preparation to testify in D.C., my first stop brought me back to where my career began. I needed to meet with a mentor who understood the threat we face and what was at stake.
General? Hey, Matt. Welcome back to Colorado.
Thanks, sir. Every service member, sir, takes the oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. What you don't spend a lot of time necessarily thinking about in uniform is what a domestic enemy is. And I've taken interest in your Flag Officers for America letters, and most recently, one in May of 2023, in which you specifically mentioned Marxism and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm planning on potentially submitting that letter as a part of the record when I go to testify before Congress.
The overarching theme in all these letters is our constitutional republic is in great peril, great danger, because of the forces coming from socialism and Marxism within our own government. Challenges everything our Constitution stands for, and that then becomes not a foreign threat, which we normally focus on in the military. It becomes a domestic threat because it's internal. In many ways, this memorial to the fallen Air Force Academy graduates who were killed in Southeast Asia symbolizes really what it's all about in terms of self-sacrifice and the courage it took to do what they did. Throughout my 32 years in the Army, 22 of those we've been fighting Marxism. We had a very hot war with Korea, as you know, in the mid-50s. And during that war, we lost about 37,000 brave Americans killed and a lot more wounded. Fighting what? They were fighting the North Korean communist and the Chinese communist. So fast forward about 10 years, we're in Vietnam. And who are we fighting there? Communist Viet Cong, Communist North Vietnamese, supported by who? The Communist Chinese. And so consider that, and where we are today in our country, the gut punch for me, Matt, is that that exact same ideology is controlling our government in the United States, in the administration and in Congress. So what about all those sacrifices to stop that from happening? And now it's come home to our own country over a period of decades. That's hard to take.
Absolutely.
How do you justify those losses?
What is going on with the DEI training today is very different. Many of these cadets and military members who are bringing me this material feel like they can't raise their hand and object. They can't raise their hand and debate whether, they should be considered oppressors just because of the color of their skin.
I'm a cadet at the United States Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. The Academy considers me a minority, but I'd like to consider myself an American. Even before I showed up for basic training on the first day, I remember in my email getting a notification saying that I had to go through a course on diversity and inclusion. And it was a really big surprise to me because I wasn't even here yet. They show us a video, and it takes you through a scenario where college students are hanging out, and then they mention going to a Black Lives Matter rally. And then one of the students decides not to go. And then they ask him why he's not going and frame him intentionally as a bad guy. Essentially, we have D&I briefs maybe about twice a semester. One of our diversity and inclusion trainings, we had a set of slides that were telling us don't use words such as mom and dad, use words such as parent 1 or parent 2. Don't say colorblind. When that slide came up, everyone was a little surprised, wondering why can't we say these words? What's wrong with this? We all have a mom, we all have a dad. What's hard is that coming into the military, I was so excited and knew this was going to be the rest of my life. But knowing what I know now, it seems like I want to do my time and then get out. This isn't really the military that I thought I was going to be. I thought our military were supposed to be apolitical, but it feels like they're becoming so interlaced that I wake up and it's just politics all day long.
You know, it's interesting. You don't see a lot of people in academia with service records. They don't tend to go into the armed forces. They don't tend to come from the armed forces, so they can hold interesting ideas. If you're being told when you enter the armed forces to look at your fellow service members by their race or ethnicity or gender or creed or some other category, you're not looking at them in the right way, which is who is competent and who is not competent in order to serve with you. When you're in a hostile environment, let's say in Kabul, Afghanistan, right, it really doesn't matter what books you read that happen to be popular at a university campus, and the results of that can be catastrophic. The individuals in question may die, others may die, and our U.S. may be compromised from a national security perspective as a result of that misplaced focus.
The A-10s always fly over this area because Davis-Monthan is nearby. And occasionally my mom would point to the A-10s flying overhead and she said, hey, maybe you'll fly one of those planes someday. I didn't believe that, and I didn't have any interest when I was young in flying those planes, but maybe my mom wondered or felt like maybe that was in my future, and it turned out it was. That's an A-10. Growing up in Arizona was influential in my decision to pursue a military career.
Hello. Sonny.
And ironically, it was at my parents' house that I decided to walk a path that would ultimately end that career. When I sat down to write the book, I knew exactly what the book needed to be about, and it was the Marxist roots of critical race theory, which had so infiltrated the diversity, equity, and inclusion complex. All of the trainings that we were receiving on the base, all of the homework assignments we were getting, all of the ideology I saw on display, I could so clearly trace to Marxism and Marxist ideology because we know from, at least from history, where that impulse leads over time, and it's to violent revolution. The outcome is certain if we don't abandon the course. And so I thought, I'm going to write a book about the outcome. The outcome is violent revolutionary conflict in this country. Marxism is the name that it's taken on since Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels wrote the Communist Manifesto in 1848. But it's far more ancient than that. The oppressor versus the oppressed narrative shows up at the very beginning of the Bible when you've got a fraternal conflict between brothers and the adversary of men's souls whispers in one's ear, you've been dealt with unjustly, you've been treated wrongly, and you can use violence to take back what rightly belongs to you. That is Marxism in a nutshell, and it's a story as old as recorded human history.
I remember some conversations I've had with relatives, a retired Air Force and airline pilot, and when he heard about Matt's book and saw the stink it was making, made comments that, you know, he needs to shut up and get his pension. And I think that's the overarching thing, that people are so worried about losing something like that, which is a huge thing Matt gave up, and he knew he was giving it up. But he knew that if he didn't speak up, no one else was going to speak up about that. And I think it's because he has a love for his God and his country. And I'm sure it's a scary, scary time for Matt. It's all on him. He's not getting a weekly paycheck or a monthly paycheck. Housing's not paid for, and it's a scary time. But he took that huge step when he was just years away from a full pension and with 2 young kids, and I'm positive that I couldn't have done it.
He could have easily just said, I'll wait a couple years.
Yeah, I'll wait.
And
I'll write the book as I've got my 20 in, but it'd been too late. I'm sure of it, because it's a runaway train.
Matt was the oldest, and so he was the one they all looked to.
He had a younger sister, the number 2, Gina, who was severely handicapped at birth, and he was always very protective of her.
Yeah.
And she'd had a number of really serious surgeries in her life, but they'd given her a tube that was supposed to push pressured air, I think, into her lungs because her muscles were too weak to breathe on her own. And instead of really helping the problem, It also caused new problems, and one of those was even though she was getting air, she couldn't use her own voice anymore to speak.
I think that they thought they had hope for a little bit more for her, but once she had it, it was really downhill quicker at that point. And that's when she said, well, it's okay. So we gathered the family and said goodbye.
I've reflected on that, especially after her passing, and I determined that it was important for me to use my voice on behalf of those who don't have a voice or who feel like they don't have a voice, because I've been given a voice and I've been given an understanding. And so my sister was a tremendous influence on me in that regard. I don't remember what home this is in, but I was dropped off for basic training and I had my brand new boots strung around my neck. That was one of the assistant coaches at the Air Force Academy who first came out and saw me play.
When you were a sophomore.
When I was a sophomore in high school, and they started recruiting me after that. It was late in the season.
Was that the time you screamed really loud?
No, that was, I screamed like a silly girl when he got his first dunk in a game.
When other colleges came to watch, I didn't necessarily have the best games of my life, and Air Force, I always played pretty well. And so it was meant to be.
Yeah.
This is my graduation from the Air Force Academy in 2006.
I just knew he was going to be great. I knew he was going to become someone great. I always knew that.
We felt that he was somebody special who would be a leader of people, and he's lived up to those expectations and his potential.
This was right after I graduated from the Air Force Academy and put on my first flight suit that didn't fit very well. And came home to Tucson while it was snowing outside.
Snow in those mountains behind us.
I had started to see just too much. I saw what the base commander was doing each week. I saw what the chaplain was doing. That other commanders at the base were complaining about the effect it was having on their troops. There was a division that it was causing. I had various service members sitting down with me in my office, coming to me and say, "Hey, sir, you got a minute to talk?" I'd sit down with them. They'd say, if they're white, "Hey, I didn't sign up for this, and I'm certainly not a racist, and I'm tired of being called a racist." I had 2 black service members sit down in my office say that they were participating in black-only events. They weren't sure what to think about them. They weren't sure what to think about their country anymore. They were either hating the trainings we were getting or were buying into it and were starting to be suspicious of or skeptical of others in their units. I called General J. Raymond. I shared with him, in essence, very specific details about what I'm sharing with you. A month later, in September, President Trump issued an executive order banning critical race theory and any and all diversity and inclusion trainings in the military workplace and in the federal agencies. I'm guessing that Trump was getting that feedback not just from Jay Raymond, a member of the Joint Chiefs, but also from other agencies in the federal government, and that's why he issued the executive order. After having seen his defiance of an executive order that came from President Trump, and his demonization of President Trump and his cabinet for being white, which he did with his civilian employees in his office. He had all of the white employees in the office, civilians, gather around, and he showed them pictures of the Trump cabinet and asked them questions, what's wrong with the picture? And the answer was, the correct answer, which none of them were willing to say, was that they're all white. This is abusive, racist, discriminatory behavior. It's illegal in the military, and he should have been fired for that behavior. Now, he wasn't, and he was defying the executive order, and so I thought, for crying out loud, the commander-in-chief issues an executive order banning this stuff, and he can't knock it off. So I'm gonna put in writing a really concise, well-documented complaint about what is happening only at this base, what I'm seeing, and I'm gonna list 24 people as witnesses on this complaint, both who would know what's going on and agree with my assessment that it's toxic and divisive, and people like the chaplain who have an entirely different view than I do, but who are also aware of what's going on, because every one of them needs to be investigated and asked the questions to get to the bottom of what the base commander is doing. General Stephen Whiting gets the complaint. Unfortunately for me, it's November 18th. The presidential election debacle was ongoing, and there was a bunch of arguing about that, not on our base, of course, but just among the American people. And he and his team in the IG office decided that they would sit on that complaint and not interview anyone until they could know for sure what the election outcome was going to be.
When the count is finished, we believe we will be the winners.
I miss being in the Space Force. I miss the idea of showing up to work, focusing on national security, using capabilities that we've got in space. And, you know, there were some things I really care about, like the stars. And I wanted others around me in the Space Force to begin to become excited about the cosmos, because I thought there's something there that is innate to human nature. We're all curious about what's out there and how it works and what the lights are that you can look up at night and see. And if we can get our force to be excited about their domain, then they'll be interested in utilizing the capabilities that we place there for national security purposes, and they'll seek to keep that a peaceful domain and seek to establish strength here at home in, through, and from the space domain.
We're joined by Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lohmeier.
Mr. President, good afternoon and happy Thanksgiving. This is Lieutenant Colonel Matt Lohmeier, commander of the 11th Space Warning Squadron.
Every year, the President has a Thanksgiving call to show his appreciation for the troops, and the Space Force selected me to be the face and voice for the service, to greet the President and the First Lady and to wish them happy Thanksgiving. And I'll tell you, the force respected that president a lot more than they respect the current president. They got the sense that he genuinely cared about their well-being, and they were grateful as hell that they didn't go fight a war in a foreign country while he was in office. There is a declining morale and a discouragement because we get overextended on the world stage for purposes we don't understand. There's this idea that I believe in, it's peace through strength. And I think that the Trump administration really believed that, and I think that world leaders respected that strength, real or perceived. They weren't sure how the man would act, but they knew he was serious, or they perceived that it was possible that he meant what he said. And we built up our military force because we were trying to focus our efforts where they belonged and to begin to whittle away at our presence overseas. That's a policy decision. The military man or woman doesn't think a whole lot about it, but what they knew is that they were starting to come home and focusing on building up a more ready force. And I think we had a stronger, happier force during the Trump administration. We need good people in uniform. We need good people to run for office. And I really believe that with all of my heart. But we need national repentance, because I don't think that decent people in office or decent people in the military or new military policy matters without a repentant country. Alexander Solzhenitsyn said the same thing. He had wondered for so long what it was that caused the demise of old Russia, brought in communism, and he writes about it, and his works, his marvelous literature facilitates the collapse of the Soviet Union. And people had said, oh, we've forgotten God, and he said, I need to spend some time thinking about it and writing about it and exploring this, and after much exploration, he said there's no better explanation than men have forgotten God. So that's why I care about what's happening up here, because it just so happens I think God's letting us know that in his own way as well. And then there are certain individuals who also have an obligation to ask others to repent or be destroyed. So while I was writing my written Inspector General's office complaint, it was November of 2020. I was concerned about some of the suspicious behavior of a particular chaplain that we've talked about at the base. One time I was there in the building late at night when he came in. I found that chaplain snooping around my ops building well after hours. I mean, chaplains do not stay at work past business hours. And at 5:30 at night, 6 at night, he was found snooping around my building. It was a locked building, and you have to have the code or a key to get into the building. He didn't live on the base. He had no business being in my building after work hours, and he was there twice in 1 week. This was while I was writing a formal written complaint, and I listed 24 witnesses, and I had made multiple copies of it because I was aware of this. I had booby-trapped my office. I had put tape in certain places on certain doors, and I put everything in its place, and I let 2 senior enlisted leaders in my unit know that I was doing this because sometimes they have access to my office. I said, don't go into my office. If you're not in my office, I want to know that someone was in here. Around those few weeks, I confronted a woman who was always following me around. In front of my unit, I confronted her because we were out doing PT outdoors during all the COVID mandates. We weren't allowed to be out there without masks on the football field. And the woman pulled up in her Jeep, and she was in the parking lot. She was watching, and it was like the second time I had seen her in her Jeep watching our PT. And so I left the PT session. I walked over to the Jeep. I said, hey, how can I help you? And she said, oh, she kind of dodged. I said, I've seen you out here a couple of times. I know you're watching my unit. She said, no. I said, bullshit. You're spying on us. And she totally broke down. It was a white female. And she said, the base commander asked me to watch and report back to him what you guys are doing. And it was coincident with all of that, being spied on, the chaplain snooping around my office, and my house being broken into. Things like that don't happen on military bases. Police come to my house. And one of the things that I noticed was that on the screen that surrounds the window on the outside, it was completely bent in, like someone had forced their way through that screen. And I pointed that out to the base police who had come to investigate, write the police report. And they said, well, we think it was probably the wind that did this. And I said, I don't think so. I said, how many other houses on the base had their windows blown in tonight by the wind? And they said, none. I said, have you ever heard in the history of your time here at this base a window being blown in by the wind? Someone pushed that window in, and they heard a loud crash because they'd knocked over the bookshelf and they ran. I shared that with my boss at the base, told him I thought the house had been broken into, and he kind of just got uncomfortable in his seat like, geez, I sure as hell hope that didn't happen because I don't want this to become a thing.
Since the founding of America 250 years ago, many things have changed. The homes in which we live, the clothes we wear, the jobs we hold, the conveniences we enjoy. But some things never change. The commitment of husband and wife, the importance of passing along our values to our children, the rewards of service to community and country, the faithfulness of God. Some wonder how America has thrived for so long and how we can ensure she continues to. As long as we keep first things first, we've only just begun. America, the beautiful.
Modern Americans like myself have never experienced the horrors of revolutionary conflict. Terms like Marxism are often reduced to mere academic or political talking points. But I know someone for whom these ideas are anything but academic.
So I was just reading yours last night.
Excellent.
And making notes. And it's, look at this.
Oh yeah, hey. Yeah. I signed this a long time ago.
You did, yeah.
September 2021.
Yeah, you inspired me, and you're one of the reasons I wrote mine. Because it's not something I thought I would ever be able to do. But here I am.
Well, I've just finished listening to yours, and I think you're one of the best warriors that I've met in my life.
Thank you.
And I was so glad to see you stand up in Loudoun County.
I've been very alarmed about what's going on in our school. The critical race theory has its roots in cultural Marxism. It should have no place in our schools.
This is young Xi.
Yeah.
So is this you?
Yes, and that was when I was 16. Originally, it's the K-12 system, just like here. But Mao said, what's the use of more education? Cut it off. So what's for us? Nothing. Send to the countryside to work in the fields, to get re-educated, to be a better communist. Mao said that he has two great achievements in his lifetime. One was CCP revolution that overthrew the sitting government, and the other is the Cultural Revolution. And so the first time he used military people. The second time he doesn't need to do that. He has an army of indoctrinated kids in schools and universities. Those were the Red Guards. The Red Guards had only one task: destruction. To burn down everything so Mao can build a new China based on the image of Maoism.
Immediately what comes to my mind when I see that is the purple braid that our Air Force Academy cadets are wearing that show that they are diversity, equity, and inclusion officers. And at once everyone recognizes who the cadet is in each squadron, that you can go and report any violation of the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives or trainings that people have received, and it turns into a kind of tattletale regime.
The day they took over power, that everyone should watch everyone else. At that time, it was made clear there was only one correct thought. That is Mao Zedong thought. And everyone that is not follow it exactly will be reported. And that can be anyone. Can be your friends, your neighbor, your coworker, even your children. The goal is the same: to divide people and then to destroy the society in order to take power. That is communism, actually. People think communism is atheism. It's not. The state religion of China is Marxism. Maoism, Marxism is a religion. You don't challenge it as truth. And you have to believe it, you have to follow it, and you have to practice it. And that's what's going on in America. DEI is the new version of Maoism religion. It is a religion. It's very deceptive because they twisted the words and then they make it sound so good. And anti-racism. Who is not on board with that, right? Equity and then love. And what we know before is you love the sinners but hate the sin. Now is you love the sin. They switch everything. That's why it's so deceptive. But look at the terms they use. It is Christian terms. They made this absolute religion, and people can't resist it. And a lot of people who just don't have the ability to see through it, so they kind of follow it, and that's the danger of Marxism. It's the old tactic. It's older than communism. It's divide and conquer. How do you control a population if they're all united, if they all call themselves American? We're all Americans. So you can't control them. The best way to control a population is divide them up and make them fight against each other. That's where we are today. A lot of Americans have not a clear understanding what's coming up. What happened during the Cultural Revolution was really a mass movement turned into a movement of masses against each other. And Mao said this famously: we need chaos to destroy the world so a new order can be built upon that. They have to destroy in order to make a new world order.
Padre. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Welcome to Hill Country.
With Xi's chilling words still ringing in my ears, and the day of my congressional testimony fast approaching, I traveled to the heart of Texas to spend time with military veterans and their families. So much trust has been lost among the veteran community, and I wondered how we might regain it.
My name is Hope Geiger, and I was a medic in the Air Force. Absolutely loved it. When I became a medical instructor, I started to see how important it was for these young kids to actually understand what it meant to be in the military. The military is not about a job. The military is about defending this country. That oath that I took, that I think most of the people sitting around here took, says, I will defend this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic, period. When I deployed my last time in 2006, I'm there, and 3 of the students that I taught were there. So I'm looking at these kids in a war zone. We would get a call, and they would say, you know, I got 4 angels coming in. Those of you who are pilots might understand this. You know, that basically means they died on the battlefield. And we'd take their uniforms off that was covered in gasoline, and we would take their wallets out of their back pockets, and we would open them up because we had to inventory everything for mortuary affairs. And we'd take those little wallets, and we would pull them out, and there would be pictures. And there's like this one picture, I remember it was a girl in a green gown, and the guy was standing next to her, and he's dead. You know, he's 19 and he's dead. This wasn't a once a month thing. This was every single day. See, the American flag, yes, I served in the military for 24 years, so you can burn that flag. But if you burn that flag, you better stomp the shit out of me first. Because let me tell you something, that flag is draped on that 19-year-old kid's coffin. That kid who signed up for the military, for whatever reason, our country said go. And he went when his mom and dad gets that phone call from DOD. And that's some bitch sitting up there in office saying, thank you for sacrificing your son, but we want to talk about DEI.
Yeah, well, when I hear stories like this, any story like this that's more grave in nature, the seriousness of combat, conflict, it puts into perspective the silliness of all of our current distractions.
My name's Chuck Sonnenberg. I did just shy of 22 years in the Air Force. My last couple of years, the Army, they were short on human intelligence. So 50 of us Air Force people volunteered, and we went to Fort Huachuca for 7 months of training to learn how to do it, and then we went to Iraq and did interrogations.
Yeah.
When I retired, I went and taught there. And I always tell people, all you had to do was have the MOS and be alive, and you get hired.
Right.
That meaning some instructors were not very good. And one of the reasons I left is because the battalion commander started telling us we need to pass basically almost everybody. We're so mad about this because intelligence collection isn't something you just let anybody do. They need to have a clue what they're doing, or more people are going to be in Hope's morgue.
As you mentioned earlier, we've got an oath that our service members take to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Much easier for me to think through some of this as a civilian than it ever was when I was in uniform. It's easy to pinpoint foreign enemies to the Constitution. Who is it that we compete with on the world stage for particular political aims that lead to conflict? That's one thing altogether. It's an entirely different matter to think through the question, and you never do when you're in uniform, who are our domestic enemies? Because it's always political, because war is political. When you start to realize, at very least, that regardless of one's political affiliation, they should all view Marxist ideology as a domestic enemy. And to write a book and be fired for it because it's politically partisan. It's like, well, really? So which side of the political aisle says that's their worldview? How is that politically partisan to attack Marxism?
I'm a 10-year service member serving the American military at Buckley Space Force Base. I'm here because I love my country and I've seen with my own eyes, heard with my own ears, things that are disturbing and counterintuitive and counterproductive to good order and discipline in the United States military and serving our mission. I wear this uniform proudly. I am reminded every day of why I serve. And then when you go in and go to meetings, what they call DEI training, there's constant bombardment of emails, just trying to fracture and section us into smaller and smaller groups. And I'm gonna pull up my phone here because it was a fellow service member and friend who confided in me and sent me this email about something he observed. In March of 2023, a unit commander had a commander's call for all 3 shifts. He then informed everyone that a current unit member will now be transitioning from male to female. He said there will be 3 major changes for this member that we should be aware of. He also stated that only the 3rd change will be what affects other members, although it will take over a year for this person to complete the, quote, transition process. They will immediately be, quote, allowed to wear the uniform of the gender they're transitioning to, namely female, quote, testing against the female fitness standards, and, quote, using the female restrooms and showers in all designated buildings. His final words to us were about as unsettling as what he just announced. He said, quote, I don't care if you don't like any of this, go talk to yourself in the mirror about it at home, unquote. Diversity happens as a byproduct of meritocracy. And if you have meritocracy, that's what we seek to do in the military, is it doesn't matter as long as you're a law-abiding citizen and as long as you're being given lawful, legal, and moral orders, then you follow them. If it deviates from that and seems and apparently fractures a unit cohesion, then it's antithetical to what we're trying to do. It's counterintuitive, it's not good for the mission, it's not good for our morale, it's not good for our country. And once the enemy comes knocking, we're gonna be in a world of hurt.
January 6th happened, 2021. And January 7th, I received a written response from General Stephen Whiting dismissing my complaint. I reached out to other people that I had listed as witnesses on that complaint, including my own Colonel 06 supervisor, and asked, I said, by the way, you don't know that I submitted this written IG complaint, but I listed you as a witness. Were you ever interviewed as a part of an investigation? And the answer was no. No one had been interviewed, including me, the person that filed the complaint. That it's unthinkable that someone who alleged illegal racial discrimination, me, would never have a phone call or an interview set up with a 3-star general who is allegedly to be investigating the complaint. The fact that there was an election going on heightened the political sensitivity of senior military leaders and was really, in my estimation, probably the driving force behind whether or not they'd actually look into my allegations and investigate anyone and interview anyone. And the fact that he was black and I was a white commander who was complaining. I mean, all of those things never mattered before, but they all of a sudden mattered in 2020 and 2021. The colonel who ran the Space Force IG got a phone call from me before I submitted electronically and by certified mail my formal written complaint. He then reached out to me after he had received it and said he was in receipt. Then he consulted the 3-star Stephen Whiting, and I expected what would then follow. He'd be counseling with his boss, General J. Raymond, commander of the Space Force, and beginning to conduct interviews with every member that I had listed on my Inspector General's complaint to get to the bottom of what was happening at Buckley Air Force Base that was rotting the culture. All of November passed, all of December passed, January 6th happened, and they saw the writing on the wall.
CNN projects Joseph R. Biden Jr. is elected the 46th president of the United States.
We did it. We did it, Joe. You're going to be the next president of the United States.
Biden is going to be the president. Trump's executive order will no longer be in place. They saw that writing on the wall, and so my complaint was dismissed. So I started to talk to other commanders of other bases and realized this isn't just a problem we're having at this base, this is happening everywhere. After my complaint had been dismissed, I got an email from the colonel who's in charge of Space Force IG, and he said, hey, when you get a free moment, please call me. I need to give you some mentorship on how to handle this stuff in the future. Meaning, I can't believe you submitted a formal written complaint against the black base commander. And so instead of doing the right thing, which was to hold a politically activist base commander accountable for his activism to his whole base. They dismissed my complaint, and the same day that I got that written letter, January 7th, the base commander promoted to 1 star. My poor wife was one of the few people on earth I was having ongoing conversation, dialogue with about the stress of the workplace because of the political nature of the workplace. That isn't a conversation that a commander, in the seat I was in, can have with the members of my unit. I can simply try and shield them to the best I can. So December, as far as this stuff goes, it was relatively quiet, with the exception of the conversations I'm having with my wife. But life was very busy. I was still a full-time commander of a unit. We had a mission to accomplish, and we were always doing missile warning, and there was a lot of highly classified things we're doing, and senior leaders in the government were taking interest in what I was doing. And meanwhile, the morale at the base is tanking, and my thinking was, at that time, I really think I'm gonna write a book about this if they don't take action. That was the very beginning where the thought settled on me and never left. And the writing process gets underway actively and full-time in my free time after that complaint was dismissed. America was fundamentally transformed in the summer of 2020. A landmark death occurred that was leveraged by domestic enemies and was used for revolutionary purposes. I felt compelled to see its aftermath at ground zero for myself and asked a couple of friends to join me.
So Minneapolis has always been a liberal city. It's always been Democrat-run. But what changed, especially here, post-George Floyd, is it's become an activist city. So it was that group that post-George Floyd actually voted to disband our police department.
We'll talk about a fearful prospect for the inner city to lose their police force.
Right. The people that get hurt the most are the people they claim to be wanting to help the most. We're going to head over to 38th and Chicago Avenue South, which is now known as George Floyd Square.
You're now entering the free state of George Floyd?
Right.
So this isn't the state of Minnesota anymore, is that? I mean, this reminds me of the CHOP or the Chaz.
Right.
It's like we've claimed this territory.
Yeah, I really did not expect to see this kind of a shrine. But he is a martyr to their cause.
He is a martyr, yeah.
And this does remind me of the Cultural Revolution, when everything is in chaos. Slogans and graffitis, it's the same feel. The feel is, it's a revolution. To me, this is the spot that they declared open war to America.
Who's they?
They, the Marxists, the communists, BMMers, Antifa, social justice warriors, the extreme left, the progressive, put them all together.
They're not going to stop. And everyone beware. They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day.
And please, show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
They're not going to let up, and they should not.
If I was a historian 50 years from now, 100 years from now, writing about the decline or the collapse of America, you'd have a chapter in your book about the events of 2020. And that's when I saw it show up for the first time in the military as well. It was talk about this and about white supremacy, the oppressor versus the oppressed narrative that I saw come right out of Marx and Engels' Communist Manifesto, except now it was focused entirely on race.
More than race, now we have...
and now it's everything else.
Everything else, everything else.
Now is not the time to rest.
We must work with gay, bisexual, and other men who have sex with men, transgender individuals, and Black and Hispanic, Latino, LGBTQI+ communities.
Share your pronouns in your email. Initiate difficult conversations about racial and gender barriers.
They asked me what my pronouns were, and I thought it was incredible to see that inclusion and change.
Your country needs you. Your country wants you.
I think we need to do a bit better in terms of making sure that we're absolutely inclusive and making sure that pathways are available for everybody that's in the ranks to realize their full potential. And so that's what that diversity, equity, inclusion is all about.
When I wrote my book, I included this episode in my book because the organization that came again to the spotlight was the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's an irresistible slogan because who doesn't want to agree with that?
Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories.
I knew they were Marxists, but to hear from their own mouths that they are trained Marxists and they're here to launch a revolution. And so people should really take their words seriously. They are communists.
I do believe in Marxism. It's a philosophy that I learned really early on in my organizing career.
Despite what I consider an abundance of evidence, there are nevertheless people who choose to see events through an altogether different lens.
I grew up just a few blocks from here on 42nd and Park. A lot of middle-class Black families in this neighborhood, a lot of leadership that's come out of this neighborhood, and was no surprise to us that this was really the birthplace of the uprising and that the history of the 3rd Precinct being held accountable for its history in our community. And while diversity should be seen as a strength, but most of the time we're trying to convince white folks of that. Mm-hmm. How y'all look at DEI is like there's some agenda coming to get y'all. I'm gonna just be honest. If there was an agenda coming to get white folks, we would have came for y'all a long time ago. And the justification is to do so has been laid out and, through all across history. I think we gotta renegotiate how we look at this issue altogether.
And this is immediately related to my book, Black Lives Matter as a Movement. Okay. And I criticized the movement, but my basis for criticism for the movement wasn't a hatred for Black people or for any movement that seeks to better the lives of human beings in any racial or political demographic, but it was because the founders of the movement were avowed Marxist organizers. And as someone who had taken the oath to support and defend the Constitution against all of its enemies, both foreign and domestic, I view Marxist agitators as domestic enemies.
First of all, like this idea that they're Marxist organizers is that's a stretch. When people talk about this socialist Marxist, like I have studied Marx, right? Like, and I think it's concerning for you to say that you see it as a threat. Trying to like make this Marxist argument, socialist Marxist argument, misses the point. And if white folks are dealing with with half of what Black folks are dealing in this country, y'all would burn stuff down too. Yeah, you can criticize them for a lot of things like Marxist socialism, like. I mean, that's like 1954 called it wants its, McCarthyism back.
Pay close attention to this 3 board. That's the feel of the Cultural Revolution. In China, it's called big character posters. It's in paper and it's just covered every piece of word they could find. And here you say, people's way, people. That is what the communist revolution always tell people about. It's about the people. It's for the people. It's to liberate the people.
This caught my attention. I see Chinese characters up here. Ren means something. What does it say?
It's 人民万岁, long live the people.
There's the word again.
Yeah, that's the slogan that during the Cultural Revolution, when all of us were chant, long live Chairman Mao, long life to Chairman Mao, and Chairman Mao would say, long live the people. All this chaos, all this revolution is for the people. But being here, you really feel a dead energy. And that is an energy of destruction, of death, of violence. That is communism. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I absolutely feel it. And it's in the air. This really, really close to my heart. I feel that we are losing this country, and I feel like so many Americans just are not waking up. They don't know because they haven't seen the ending of that movie that I was in. We are losing this country. And this time, if we lose it, there's nowhere else for me to go. And there's nowhere else for Americans to go. That's it. That is it.
On Friday, May 14th, I went home for the night, and I had just published my book several days earlier, and I was wondering when this was going to come to the attention of senior defense officials. And I got a phone call from my boss's office, and hey, the boss wants you to come in and chat with him. And I knew it was about my book that had been published a few days earlier. And so I get in my car at the house on base, and on my way to my boss's office, a reporter from military.com calls me. And she wanted to get a report on what my feelings were, how I felt about having been fired from my command. And I thought, well, now I know what's coming. I said, I'm sorry, you caught me just a little bit too soon. I'm on my way to my boss's office right now to be fired, apparently. So why don't you call me back in a little bit? And it was clear to me on the rest of that drive, and I pull up in the parking lot, I thought, I'm gonna be fired, and they're coordinating a story with military.com. I don't know what that story looks like, but she got her timing wrong, and she thought I'd already been fired. And the story was apparently supposed to release in the national news the next morning, and it's like 5 p.m. Mountain Time. And she's calling from the East Coast. So yeah, she's thinking, it's safe, he's been fired. So this is well coordinated. The base commander wasn't there when I got in, but my boss and his senior enlisted officer were in the room. I had great relationships with both of them, but they stood aside and pointed to the phone and said, General Stephen Whiting's on the phone. He says, I'm gonna have to relieve you of your command for being politically partisan while acting in an official capacity, which is totally bogus, and for publicly criticizing your chain of command, totally bogus. Hadn't done either of those things. And then the last thing he said was, and now I'm placing you under investigation to determine if you've been politically partisan while acting in an official capacity. So I was fired for the very thing they were going to start to investigate. And my sense was they hadn't got the book in their hands yet, but they heard about it. And what they would have found when they opened the book was that in 3 places, starting with the copyright page, was that it says these are my own views and not the views of the Defense Department, the Space Force, yada yada, the whole legal jargon that was required, that I was advised to put in the book. And they probably realized right then that they were in big trouble, that I wasn't a political animal, that I wasn't publicly criticizing my chain of command, that I hadn't denigrated the Secretary of Defense or the sitting Commander-in-Chief, although many other people were doing just that in the former administration, by the way, and that's okay. And as I walked out of my boss's office after being fired, I turned my back, I walk out, I didn't have any questions from my boss. I was actually blown away that it had happened so quickly without them even being able to get their hands on my book. And that black senior enlisted leader shouts after me, he says, Colonel! And I turn around, he sticks out his arms. And he just was speechless. He had tears in his eyes. He comes and gives me a big hug, and he squeezes me tight. He says, I love and respect the hell out of you.
The golden age is a choice.
A choice to cherish the greatest gift we've been given.
Waking up every day an American citizen. It flows from our founding fathers.
Through our grandparents.
Through our parents.
Through us.
To future generations.
Our heritage is our future.
The golden age is a choice.
Let's choose well.
One of the things, sir, I was wanting to chat with you about was my overarching motive for writing my book. I started with the end in mind, and the end was the possibility for violence if we continue to walk the path of the Marxist revolutionary ideology and spirit. And so I thought I'd like to meet you here where the Battle of Bull Run, the first Battle of Bull Run, took place, which shocked the nation. We have tens of thousands of troops gathered on both sides and engaged in a violent conflict And that seems so far removed from the modern American's thought. Is it your view that it's possible that even in modern America, we can get to a place ideologically where we hate the other so much that we could use violent means to destroy them?
You know, thousands of men died on this battlefield 164 years ago. And many of those men had served together in the same army. They went to West Point together. They were friends. I doubt that any of them ever could conceive of a day where they would point a gun at each other. Inconceivable. As we stand here on this ground today, I am worried about the tension that is mounting in our country over ideology. It's different in this particular case, but the division is still there. The tension is there. And I pray to God that we can find a way to come together on this before we would ever point another weapon at each other.
The United States, I think, has had two periods of great division. One of them is very obvious, and that's the American Civil War and the period we live in now. In other words, we have not been more divided in American history since the 1860s, when more than 600,000 Americans lost their lives. I hope and pray that we're not at the beginning of a similar kind of scenario, but there are some warning signs, some huge warning signs. When the neo-Marxists started taking over our institutions, our universities first, then our city councils, then elements of the federal government, our K through 12 schools, Americans decided that they no longer could really lean into, they could no longer really invest in even some of their institutions in their own communities. That's created huge divisiveness. Now, I do think there is a narrow window for us to overcome that, to correct that. But it's going to take not just special leaders, but it's also going to require each of us as individuals to understand we probably have this decade, the 2020s, to reverse course. Otherwise, I am really afraid that we are in a period of not just division, but real decline.
I'm hoping I get asked the question what our active duty military members are concerned about. And you know what's interesting about all of this, now it's been 2.5 years since I was relieved of my command, and I'm showing up to testify before Congress. I reflect back onto that time with Jay Raymond, and none of the things about which I'm testifying tomorrow before this subcommittee of the House Oversight Committee were ever discussed by senior military leaders while I was Jay Raymond's aide. And it wasn't until I showed up in command in 2020, right after the death of George Floyd, that political activists seized that moment in history and tried to overtly politicize the military workplace, bully people, force them into conversations that they naturally don't participate in. Like, this is not this woke military discussion, the DEI initiatives, transgenderism in the force, LGBTQ celebration. There were minor hints of all of that before I came into command in 2020. It was never discussed as a part of, in all of those meetings in the Pentagon and all of those meetings in the halls of Congress, this was not the talking points. These ideas never came up. So one of my biggest concerns, and let me just say this, like, that weighs the heaviest on me is disappointing those who are still in uniform, who hope that someone with authority and with knowledge can accurately serve as a voice for them. Because so often those in uniform don't feel like they have a voice because they're supposed to be apolitical. And so you get this opportunity that apparently is the kind of once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to speak up on their behalf as a civilian, not wearing the uniform of your country. You don't want to disappoint those people.
Good morning. I want to welcome everyone to this hearing before the Subcommittee on National Security, the Border, and Foreign Affairs. Today's hearing is the risks of progressive ideologies in the U.S. military. I want to express gratitude for our witnesses for being here. It's my sincere hope that this hearing provides a platform for constructive dialogue on the issues that face today's military.
I'll just be honest, and I am a bit dismayed and disappointed to be here at this hearing today. Back in March, we held a hearing called Ensuring Force Readiness, Examining Progressivism's Impact on an All-Volunteer Military. The idea that, quote, wokeness is a top national security threat did not make any sense then and does not make any sense today. When we could be working in a bipartisan way to address real challenges to our national security. Our allies in Ukraine need immediate aid. We need to support Taiwan and provide aid, of course, in the Middle East. And yet here we are investigating wokeness. Now, it's not wokeness that is threatening our national security, whatever that word actually means. The real threat to our security is a far-right extreme obstruction of dysfunction and culture war stunts. This hearing is disappointing, but I look forward to working with our chairman and hope there can be bipartisan solutions. I yield back.
I'm from the state of Florida. This war on wokeism is not new to me. And it's a shame that Republicans on this committee haven't caught on to my governor DeSantis' failing presidential campaign that's based on this war on woke. And this misplacement on wokeism in the military endangers America's national security by ignoring the real threats. Look, service members aren't leaving the military because of DEI training. This hearing is entitled The Risk of Progressive Ideologies in the U.S. Military. DEI is not a progressive ideology. It's just the right thing to do. If diversity, equity, inclusion strengthens our national military, it does not work against it.
So historically, when the military has been progressive, has gone beyond where other policies may be, has tried to encourage diversity or welcome people to be diverse and to learn about each other, there has been no harm to force readiness.
Mr. Lohmeier, I'm interested to know what has happened in the last 3 years that has caused lethality to deteriorate in the military.
There's been an overt politicization of the military workplace and the forcing of trainings that are anti-American, that criticize our founders, that allege that white supremacy is a problem within the military ranks, which has never been proven, and all of that rhetoric that occurred once Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin took office led to a bunch of moaning and bitching and complaining behind closed doors of our service members, and I heard it as a commander. And so I wrote a formal written IG complaint about it that was dismissed by senior leaders because they were afraid of the political and racial climate that we've created in this country. And so they were afraid to hold one another accountable for their politics. Senior leaders. So they're not held accountable for their political worldview, but young people will be held accountable. I'm living evidence and a living example of the fact that the diversity initiatives are discriminatory. I was kicked out for saying I'd like to depoliticize the workplace, not for advocating for Republican candidates, not for criticizing Democrat candidates. I never publicly advocated for anyone politically. I would reject the notion that diversity is our strength based on DEI definitions of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Skill and performance matter in the military if you'd like to deter conflict and win our nation's wars, period. As a commander in the military, I had a black colonel fly across the country to promote me to lieutenant colonel because I love the hell out of the guy and respect his views on the Federalist Papers, which he was teaching me after work hours, and because he was the best leader I've ever worked with. So don't bullshit me and say that you think you know what you're talking about. You've never served. You don't understand how this works. We care about performance in the military, period. You don't know what you're talking about. Most of the people in this room don't know what they're talking about. We need lethality in the military. Period. All of the stuff you guys talk about, the men and women in uniform don't think about. They go play Call of Duty at night after they learn their mission and execute that mission, period. They don't know what you're talking about. They don't know what you're voting on. They don't care about your sexual preference. They don't care what you look like, and they don't care what the person next to them looks like, period. I'm a citizen of this country, and I can dislike you and criticize you all I want here, but our men and women in uniform cannot. And so I speak on their behalf when I say lethality matters, merit-based selection and promotions matter, and your ideology doesn't matter one bit. And we need to identify principles which will preserve our union. and preserve the unity of the United States military. If we do not, we'll lose that union.
He was speaking out on his personal capacity, which is absolutely allowed and is a fundamental right of every American citizen, whether you join the military or not, in your personal capacity, out of uniform. But what I also know is he was pushing back on the orthodoxy, the ideology that the progressive left are trying to impose at the political level on this Pentagon. And man, they came down on him like a ton of bricks.
A lot of times people don't speak out because they're afraid of consequences. But what Matt did is he told a story from inside out that nobody really had ever heard at that point.
We lost one of the best lieutenant colonels in the entire military. One with a bright future, no doubt would have become, if he continued along the path he was on, and I'm certain he would have, a general officer. We lost a role model for integrity and character, a guy that stands up for what's right.
I think they knew he was speaking for the silent majority, that he was speaking for people that it's just simmering right underneath the surface, and they wanted to cut it off and make an example before others started speaking out the way he was.
One of the greatest obstacles to the success of a Marxist revolutionary cause is a strong, united military force. And when you see that the military is now subject to the same dividing, polarizing forces that the rest of the American people are being divided by, you know your country's in trouble. The reason I needed to speak up was first and foremost because I took my oath to support and defend the Constitution seriously. And when you take the oath, you sign up to defend your country against its enemies, both foreign and domestic. And so, at some point in the service member's career, they have to grapple with the question of what is a domestic enemy? And how is it that anyone has ever taken the oath to defend the Constitution against its domestic enemies is to actually, practically speaking, do that thing? That's a hard question to answer, especially for a military service member whose expectation is to be apolitical. When the domestic enemy tends to be political in nature. And when we've got people who are parroting Marxist narratives of American history that are anti-American, that tends to have, as a consequence, the detriment of military morale, that tend to have, as a consequence, division in the military workplace, and that tend to erode our readiness and lethality, I deem that a domestic threat. And so I chose to speak up about it.
Thank you, Mr. President. We now have time for one last question.
Make this a good one.
My name is Matt Lohmeier. I was an Air Force F-15 pilot, and I was a commander in your newly created U.S. Space Force. I am also the first veteran of the Space Force because under the Biden-Harris regime, I was fired from my command and lost my pension for criticizing DEI trainings that were rampant in the military. Those trainings are still dividing our troops, and thank you for saying you would fire those few woke generals who are a big problem.
They're gone.
I'm going to suggest that it might, in fact, require ongoing oversight and a persistent, consistent, watchful eye within the Pentagon to ensure this monster never returns to the Defense Department. Will you consider establishing a special task force, office, or position to ensure that these monsters never return to the Defense Department?
You know what I'll do? And I'm pretty good at this stuff. Sometimes you get it wrong. I'm going to put you on that task force. I think it's good. Not going to do better than him. I'll put you on. Make sure you give the name. Thank you. Beautiful. Right? I have your approval.
Yes, sir. I
have your approval. We're not going to get better than him. You're right about it. You're right. 100%. Thank you.
The Heritage Foundation is proud to support Call Sign Courage, a powerful story about service and love of country. The men and women who serve our nation, who wear the uniform, whether on active duty or as veterans, represent the very best of America. When someone puts on that uniform, they make a solemn promise to defend our Constitution and the nation we cherish. Lieutenant Colonel Matt Lohmeier took that promise seriously. A decorated Air Force pilot and Space Force commander, he spoke out when political ideology began creeping into our military, and he paid a price for it. He was removed from command and made an example of. Call Sign Courage tells his story, a testament to conscience, moral courage, and the willingness to stand for what's right, even when it costs you everything. Our military exists for one reason: to protect the American people and win our nation's wars. It is not a laboratory for social experiments or political agendas. That's why the leadership of President Trump and Secretary Pete Hegseth is crucial. They're restoring a merit-based, mission-first military, one focused on strength, readiness, and when necessary, lethality. Matt Lohmeier's journey from being silenced to serving again in national leadership is more than personal vindication. It signals a renewed embrace of patriotism and principled service in America. Heritage is honored to support a film that captures this pivotal moment. Because this isn't just one man's story. It's the story of a nation stepping into the dawn of a new American golden age.